Last time we celebrated the feast of St. Peter and Paul on a Sunday 6 years ago, but it's one of the few feasts that takes the place of the usual Sunday prayers and readings. The reason for it is because of the importance of these two apostles for the Church of Rome, which of course is the mother church. If you walk into St. Peter's Square today, you will see on one side and then on the other a statue each of these two apostles. In fact, there's a picture of them on the front of the missalette, frequently depicted together in painting. The Catholic Church really owes its development to the influence of these two men. St. Paul was the one who brought the church out into the world as making it an international, global entity instead of simply being a Jewish sect, so to speak. And St. Peter, we believe, was the one from whom all of our popes descend. So Pope Francis is the 266th successor of St. Peter. I've been to St. Peter's a number of times. St. Peter's is actually a shrine to the saint. And underneath the altar where the Pope celebrates Mass, several hundred feet below, is the tomb of the Apostle, which I've seen. It's not easily accessible to the public. One needs a special pass to get down there. The bones of first century man, strong, powerfully built man, were discovered in connection with the tomb. They're probably the relics of St. Peter. The tomb is, without any question, his tomb because of its markings and so forth. The shrine of St. Peter was erected, as we have it today, as the second church on that spot. The first church dates back to the 4th century. Prior to that time, it was illegal to be a Catholic in the Roman Empire. So the first 36 popes or so were martyred for the faith. One classic example, Pope St. Sixtus celebrating Mass in the catacombs. The catacombs are underground cemeteries, meaning tunnels underground. There are 400 miles of these tunnels, and there are probably a dozen sets of catacombs, perhaps. The Pope was celebrating Mass there, and he was arrested and then decapitated with his 4 deacons. The 5th deacon was named Lawrence. He came several days later, and the Pope predicted would happen. So to be the Pope in that age in the Church was almost assuredly a death sentence because of the oppressive government. The Roman government not authorizing any unofficial religion, such as the Catholic religion was. The history of the popes has been tumultuous and brilliant at the same time. There are many stories. One early pope, Pontian, who was also canonized, was sentenced to the salt mines to work where he died. There was a man who was sentenced there with him who was an anti-pope, which means a false claimant to the throne. But he also died with the Pope. Apparently they were reconciling because they're both recognized today as saints. In modern times, we've had some very outstanding men who held the office of St. Peter. It's not always been the case because you have 266 people. You'll find some people in the group who aren't particularly outstanding and some who are not. But all things considered, we've had many fine candidates for the office of St. Peter. The longest reigning pope was Pope Pius IX. He reigned 32 years. He was the pope 100 years ago who gave us dogmatic pronouncement of the Immaculate Conception. The reason this church is named for the Immaculate Conception is because of Our Lady's appearances in Lourdes, France, where she said she was the Immaculate Conception. which was made 2 years after Pope Pius IX declared the dogma that Mary is indeed the Immaculate One who bore Jesus. Her immaculate nature allowed her to be the fitting mother of the Redeemer. Pope Pius IX also propounded the teaching on papal infallibility. This was not, on his part, an attempt to wrest power from himself. That was not the point. But it was simply a clarification of what Jesus said to St. Peter. In Luke chapter 22, verse 32, Satan will sift you like wheat, but you must strengthen the faith of your brothers. Which means that the responsibility of Peter and his successors is to build up the faith of the bishops of the church and the people of God who are under their authority. Because, as Jesus said to Peter, gates of hell will not prevail against you. Meaning that the onslaughts, evil spirits, and their falsehoods will not get the betterment of the Church of Jesus, provided people stay close to the Holy Father. People who don't listen to the Pope, opening the door up to a great deal of mischief. As Pope Benedict said, who's still alive as Pope Emeritus, that today many people believe that truth is only relative. My truth is not your truth. Pope John Paul II said that that's poison for the mind. There isn't any way that we can know reality once we dispense with the capacity to know truth. And without knowing what the truth is about anything, we open the door up to a great deal of evil. The devil loves gray, not keen on black or white. He likes everything to be murky. Church stands as really the only institution in the world today of this significant size, the great beacon of what the truth is, teaching the truth to all nations. In our time, we've had some outstanding men. Pope John the 23rd, who as a boy was from such a poor family, he carried his shoes to school, and he rose to the papacy. He was only Pope for 4 years. He became the Pope in 1959. He's the one who convoked the Second Vatican Council. The Second Vatican Council is taken by many to be the beginning of churches opening to the world. Not in the sense of being converted by the world, in the sense of making some adjustments. But the council itself is not always applied properly, and sometimes it's misunderstood. But the council itself, if people actually read what the council taught, is indeed something to learn from in terms of almost all aspects of Catholic living. Pope John the 23rd was succeeded by Pope Paul VI. Pope Paul VI concluded the council. Pope Paul is up for beatification, which means that's the second to the last step before canonization. Pope Paul, among other things, is noted for weighing in on what does the church think about the widespread acceptance of contraception. Pope Paul VI was a prophet. He said many things would come about as a result of this. One thing of which there would be a great strain on marital fidelity. And the number one reason for divorce today is adultery. Pope was right. He also said that the level of morality in our society, in societies, except contraception, would lower significantly. That is true. He said women would become objectified. That is true. He also said, perhaps most ominously, wait till governments get their hands on these things. And in fact, governments use contraceptive imperialism, including our own, we've done this for decades, as a way to control people in other lands. So instead of having large poor families, people in impoverished nations have small poor families. Human beings are much more important than the things they have. It is not clear thinking to erase people's lives, to limit people in terms of the number of people in this world because of ills. The greatest asset we have is the human person. And many people who come into this world who are gifted by God, who have destinies, indeed they put their gifts to right use, have all kinds of contributions that they can make to society at large. When people are not allowed to live, that is indeed a great loss to society, to culture. Perhaps the greatest man of the 20th century was Pope John Paul II. In fact, George Weigel, his biographer, and you can read, he has a couple of books. The first is called Witness to Hope. Excellent book. George Weigel says, perhaps the greatest pope since the Reformation. What Pope John Paul II did was he recast the papacy into being a worldwide agency for evangelization. Pope John Paul II traveled almost 700,000 miles, which is about 3 times the distance from the earth to the moon, going to many countries. More people saw him in the flesh than any other person who ever lived because of his great travels and the massive audiences that he attracted. His message was, do not be afraid. Jesus is our Redeemer. And he influenced the lives of many countless people. Certainly his World Youth Day is very instrumental. If you ask many a young priest today, who were some of the influences in your life as to why you became a priest, you will hear many of them say because of Pope John Paul II. Great gift to the church. Pope John Paul could have had a very short papacy because he was shot after only about 3 years in office. 1981, but through the intercession of Our Lady of Fatima, on whose anniversary day he was shot, May the 13th, he was allowed to continue for many years. He ended up being the second longest reigning pope in the history of the church. Great gift of God. I would recommend reading his biography. Think about it. It will help to edify people in their faith. Pope Benedict, of course, also changed the papacy. He retired, first pope to do that, hundreds of years. But he did it as an act of humility because he recognized the rigors of the office, not able to function, to do what he needed to do because of his physical limitations. Pope Benedict was a world-class scholar. Anything he's written, very worthwhile, to say the least. Present Holy Father, Pope Francis, only been in office for a year. Pope Francis is very pastoral. Pope Francis sometimes is misunderstood, especially by the media. The media wants to co-opt the Pope to suggest that Pope Francis somehow finally is a Pope who is not particularly Catholic, but that isn't true. Always take with a grain of salt accounts you read about what the Pope says in the secular press. Because the secular press has a tendency to take things out of context and to twist things. And Pope Francis very often has had that happen. He is legitimate, and we are very blessed that we have had such people in the office of the Pope. The papacy stands firm. Remember when Pope Benedict was elected back in 2005, one of the local ministers, who's not a Catholic, said to me, I really admire the church and that there was an election of a new Pope, because he said, in my church there is no magisterium. And he was talking specifically about his particular denomination being ripped apart by the redefinition of marriage. The Catholic Church will never go along with any counterfeit forms of marriage. And we can be grateful that the The reason is because Jesus said, the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Falsehood will not prevail against the church. It doesn't mean that there won't be any casualties. There are people who leave the church every day. There are people who don't know what the church is. There are many people who listen to competing voices of the world, who have other ideas about what life is about, whether truth is real, what about death, what to do about it. But only the church of Christ, founded by Jesus, gives us the full package of truth, not just parts of it. Gives us what we need to make our way through this difficult world and to reach salvation. One of the old symbols of the church is the ship, or the bark, B-A-R-Q-U-E. You can imagine a bark or a ship being tossed about on waves. We are very foolish if we get off that ship.